You're listening to Police, the podcast from the Police Federation of England and Wales. To find out more, visit polfed.org. You can listen and download our podcasts via most podcast platforms. Simply search for Police, the podcast from the Police Federation of England and Wales.
Hello, welcome to Police, the podcast from the Police Federation of England and Wales. My name's John Partington, and I'm the Acting National Secretary of the Police Federation, and I currently work within the National Secretary's office. In the office, I work with Mel Warnes, and together we look after the pay, conditions of service and pensions on behalf of the membership across England and Wales. In today's podcast, we're going to look in more detail around the work that we do around the Police Remuneration Review Body. For this podcast, we will refer to this body as the Pay Review Body. The Pay Review Body focuses on your pay and conditions of service and has an important part in making recommendations around your overall remuneration package. What I'm going to do firstly is outline the work that we are doing around the Pay Review Body, then outline some of the problems that we have within this arena, and then I'm going to go through some of the more specific areas that we are asking them to look at around your pay and conditions of service. So what have we done this year at the Police Federation? This year, we have taken a slightly different approach in how we work towards the evidence that we prepare. The work towards submissions to the Pay Review Body in the past has generally been done in isolation. That's not to say that members' views haven't been taken into account. However, this year we wanted to be more open and transparent with our members, and that has been our commitment to you. You will by now have all received an email outlining the areas that we are focusing on in making our arguments to the Pay Review Body. These areas have been developed by engaging with members around the country, as well as our research and policy team at the Police Federation. Alongside this is the work of the Social Market Foundation, who completed our annual pay and morale survey, and also the work on the P factor that was completed by Professor Peter Turnbull. However, once evidence is prepared, there are some issues that we have with the Pay Review Body. Many people will not be familiar with how the process operates, so I will try and explain this from a Police Federation perspective. The overarching issue that we have is that the body is controlled by the government, and it's controlled by the government in a few different ways. Firstly, because there is a remit letter that goes from the government to the Pay Review Body. This means that there's no true independence of the review body itself. The remit letter sets out the areas that the Pay Review Body are to look at for a particular year. So from the start, any independence to look at areas that the Pay Review Body feel are important are restricted by the government. The second issue is that members of the Pay Review Body are also selected by the government. The third issue is that once submissions are made to the Pay Review Body, there is no opportunity to challenge other people's submissions or to rebut evidence that you may feel isn't factually correct or that has not been properly evidenced. What this creates is a body that is actually working in isolation, making recommendations that affect your paying conditions. The fourth issue is that once the body have made their recommendations, we don't get to see them. They are sent back to the government. The government can then choose to accept them, decline them, or modify them. So we have a system which is controlled at both ends by the government, and in the middle there is a body that is selected by the government who are working in isolation. A great analogy of this was given to me once. It's like a football match where one side selects the opponent's players, referees the game, and has a veto over the result. After many years of making detailed submissions to the Pay Review Body, the Federation made a decision back in 2021 to withdraw from the process. This was a formal withdrawal from that body. Having said that, we still raise areas of concern on your behalf every year because that is the only body that at this current time can actually have an impact on your paying conditions, and for us not to engage with them would not be beneficial to you. It is also important to mention here that in 2024 the Federation did a poll of its members asking you whether or not you wanted us to pursue collective bargaining and binding arbitration on your behalf. Over 97.7% of members who responded to that survey said they wanted us to pursue collective bargaining. The reason behind all of this goes back to 2014. Before the Pay Review Body, there was a police negotiating board. Within that arena, there was negotiation and collective bargaining. There was the ability to fully negotiate around paying conditions, and if agreement couldn't be made, then there was a binding arbitration process that needed to be followed. Since 2014, police officers' pay has continued to be eroded. We have seen that the recommendations from the Pay Review Body haven't always been suitable for police officers across England and Wales. Part of our ongoing work around this is to challenge the Pay Review Body and to seek a move back to collective bargaining and binding arbitration. As we concentrate on this year, 2025, it is important that we do make them aware of the issues that are affecting rank and file officers across the country. Now we will move on to the areas that we are asking them to look at this year. The first area that I will touch on is the annual pay award. This is what probably most people look at every year. It's how much your pay is going to be uplifted, and it is normally set as a percentage. The problem that we have around this is that over the last decade and a half, there has been a real terms loss of police pay. This is now at 21% for frontline officers. Our argument's that if recruitment and retention issues are to be addressed within policing, then the pay needs addressing, and we want the 21% loss of police pay rectifying. We believe that we have provided evidence in our pay document to support rectifying this loss, and also rectification of pay will also be a benefit to the public in terms of the service that they receive and by not constantly spending public money to recruit and retain officers. An important part of your pay is something called the P factor. For those who aren't aware of this, the P factor is an enhancement to your pay, and I'll try and explain what this is and how it works. When people look at police officer pay, they compare it to other similar jobs. Those jobs could be within the private sector or the public sector. The issue is that there are some unique features of policing, which means that it should attract an additional payment. Part of this is for the dangers that you face. Part of this is also for the restrictions that are placed on your private life. So this is called the P factor. There are ongoing debates around what percentage the P factor should be set at. However, we have strong evidence to suggest that it's not set at the right level for police officers, and this has formed part of our evidence to rectify the 21% reduction in police officer pay over the last decade and a half. Having just mentioned how they actually look at police officer pay, which is to look at it across other sectors, whether it be the public or the private sector, there also needs to be some fundamental work done on actually what is the base pay for police officers. We question if it's possible to look at other jobs with similar roles and responsibilities. This is because police officers undertake a unique role, and with that comes responsibilities and risks that are simply not evident in other jobs. Because of this, we argue that it is very difficult to benchmark police officer pay, even before the P factor is added into it. As warranted officers, you are all each individually responsible for the decisions you make every day, and how you go about your policing. And ultimately, if you do something wrong, you are held accountable to a very high level for those decisions that you make. So we are asking that the base pay needs a fundamental review to set it at the correct level. We also believe that police constables are fully competent more quickly than the 7-point pay scale that currently operates. Does it actually take 7 years to become a fully competent police officer? The traditional approach to police pay was that you would move up the pay scale as you progress through the years of service, a pay increase for each year. Whilst you may gain additional experience, that doesn't mean that you're not fully competent. So we are asking for those pay points to be reduced to 5. What this means, in effect, is that you could reach the top of the constable's pay scale 2 years earlier. The Pay Review Body also looks at other areas that affect your overall remuneration package. Some of these are allowances, some of these are weighting factors, and some of these are payments. Although these don't form part of your base pay as police officer's salary, they do make up an important part of the overall remuneration package for you. The first one I want to touch on is a shift alteration allowance. This is something that is not currently in the police regulations, but we feel that it should be. We have been speaking to many Federation branches around the country, and we have strong evidence that officers are having their shifts changed at short notice and at an alarming rate. Although changing shifts impacts on an officer's private life, there is often also a financial cost to the officer. An example of this could be if you've got children that need looking after, and then you've got additional childcare costs to cater for. Officers, because of the demands that you have and because of the job that we do, which is 24/7, are entitled to a shift roster, and that shift roster should cover 3 months. What we are saying now is that there is an alteration to that shift roster for those 3 months, then there should be some financial compensation for the officer. Like I said, this will be a new allowance. If forces plan the shifts of officers effectively, then ultimately this wouldn't need to be paid. But on those occasions when there needs to be a change in the officer's shift pattern, or when the force haven't properly looked at the officer's shift patterns moving forward, then there will be a financial impact on the force which will be given to the officer. This is very similar to how the on-call allowance was meant to work. It was meant to be a disincentive payment. I'll now cover the South East and London allowances. Although there is one set pay scale for police officers across England and Wales, there are additional payments that are made to those in the South East and for those who work in London. These additional payments are allowances, and they are designed to deal with the problems of recruitment and retention. The allowances are not meant to deal with the increased costs of living in the South East or London. So the main problem that we have with these allowances is that they are discretionary. So the Chief Constables in the South East and the Commissioners in the Metropolitan Police in the City of London have a discretion to set these at a certain level. What we are now saying is that once a pay review body has looked at detailed evidence that has been given to them, made a recommendation which is independent, which has been sanctioned by the government, then there should be no discretion around the implementation of these allowances. It should be down to the pay review body to set the allowances which are then implemented. The dangers with allowances that are discretionary is that the discretion lies with the chief officer. They can set the amount at a level under the maximum that is allowed, and they can also lower the amount that officers receive. So what we are asking for is these to be non-discretionary. We also have some issues moving forward around the levels that these are set at, and there is ongoing work around this at the moment. So the South East and London allowances are to deal with the recruitment and retention issues that policing faces. This is different to the way in which London Waiting works. London Waiting was introduced to compensate officers for the increased cost of living in the capital. This was brought in many years ago, where it may have been set at an appropriate amount to compensate people with. The problem is that it's uplifted every year in line with the annual pay award. In years where there isn't an annual pay award, or one that's set below the inflation level, if the London Waiting doesn't go up at the same amount, then it's not keeping up with the actual inflation that's taking place inside London. So, for example, police pay is uplifted by 2%, London Waiting goes up 2%. But if inflation's set at 3%, London Waiting isn't doing what it's actually designed to do, which is to keep up with the cost of living in London. This ultimately means that London Waiting gets weaker, and like I've just said, isn't doing the job that it's meant to be doing. We are asking for a full review of this to make sure that it gives them an amount of money that is suitable for the increased costs of living in London. And we're also asking that year on year that this is increased in relation to the consumer price index and the rise in housing costs within London, rather than the annual pay award. That means it should year on year reflect the actual increased costs of living in London rather than the pay awards that are given by the government. Turning now to payments, we have something called an unsociable hours payment. A lot of you will see this in your pay packet, especially those who work on response teams. This payment is set at a certain rate when you work Monday to Sunday during certain times, but the problem is that there's no enhancement to take into account Saturday and Sunday working. When we looked at other organisations, it seems to be that Saturday and Sunday working attracted higher payments, and that police unsociable hours payments was behind these other organisations. When you look at unsociable hours being set at 10% of the hourly rate, many other organisations are much higher for working on a Saturday and Sunday. So we're asking that people who work on Saturdays and Sundays receive additional unsociable hours payments at an increased amount. Next is the on-call allowance. For those with specialist skills within the police service, you may find that you're asked by your managers to do something what we call on-call. For those who don't know, and I'm sure most of you do, this is where you're available on your rest days or after you've finished your normal working day. Being on call means that you're contactable for a certain skill that you've got. It could mean working over the phone, or working from home, or being recalled back into the police station. Like I said earlier, this is meant to act as a disincentive allowance. If it is paid, it's meant to be a disincentive to a force financially. The idea being that if you resource correctly and they plan ahead, then the on-call allowance shouldn't need to be paid that often. The issue when this was brought in under Windsor was that this was set too low for this to be the case, and we feel that it is still set too low for it to be seen as a disincentive, and instead it's used as a cheap alternative from actually getting more officers on a shift pattern to cover the work that needs to be done. We believe that officers, when they finish their work or when they're on their rest days, should be at home, resting and recuperating. So we've made some recommendations around this. Police staff are actually paid £36.13 when they're on call. So we've asked that the police officer rate reflects the police staff rate. But it shouldn't be the case that you're expected to be on call on your rest days. Like I've just said, we would prefer that you rest and recuperate on your rest days and spend time with your family and friends. Because of this, we've asked that the payment should be doubled. So there should be double the amount of £36.13 when you're on call on a rest day. Even more of a concern is that some people do on call when they're on annual leave. This shouldn't happen, and that is our basic stance. People who are on annual leave should be taking that time off. But when this does happen and people are on call on annual leave days, we are asking that the payment is set at 5 times the normal amount. And this will then act as a disincentive to make sure that people do take their annual leave. Concerning around this is that there's no national guidance around on-call and there's no data collected centrally. So each force will approach on-call slightly differently. So when we try and do any detailed work around on-call, or to explain how difficult it is for officers to actually get some time to rest and recuperate, it's very difficult for us to make those arguments because there's no suitable data to work from. So we're asking for this data to be collected and for some national guidance to be issued. We're also asking that the on-call allowance should be index-linked and that it should form part of your pensionable pay. Moving to motor vehicle allowance. We have been in many discussions around motor vehicle allowance, but unfortunately there seems little appetite for this to be increased. That doesn't mean we can't make our own submissions, but at the moment we've chosen not to make a submission on motor vehicle allowance, just the fact that it needs to be increased. If you want police officers to use their private vehicles for police work, then there needs to be a financial compensation for this. The view of many Police Federation representatives now is that it's not financially suitable for you to use your car, and there's no obligation for anyone to use their own vehicle for police work. You don't need to make it available, and this is particularly important when families only have access to one car, and the car is often needed for other things. It is only right that if a vehicle is needed for policing purposes, it is provided by the police force and not the officer. For many of you who are public order trained, you will have heard of an allowance called Away from Home Allowance and Hardship Allowance. You will most probably have been paid this if you were sent outside your force area to do mutual aid. Police Scotland have a very good remuneration package around this. So when their officers are on mutual aid, there is a decent compensation package that's given to them. The package that is on offer to officers in England and Wales isn't the same and is set at a lower amount. So we're asking that we have parity with our officers north of the border, and that these two allowances match Police Scotland. Moving on to entitlements. Your biggest thing is that you'll probably look for in your entitlements is your annual leave. We've made arguments over the last few years that annual leave needs increasing and the time it takes to get to the top of the annual leave scale needs reducing. After many years, we've been successful with the Pay Review Body, who made recommendations that the level should be increased for those younger in service, and that the time it takes to reach the top of the pay scale should be reduced. However, we feel that there's more that can be done in this area. We feel that officers should reach the top of the annual leave pay scale at 5 years, and that the highest level of annual leave should still be uplifted. We believe that it's not set at the right level. Again, your colleagues north of the border in Scotland do receive more annual leave entitlements, so we're asking for this to be increased. We're also asking that for those who are longer in service, that there's some form of long service leave that is introduced. So when officers are mid-service, they can take a significant amount of time out of the workplace to refresh themselves before they come back into policing. And this is not uncommon in some other countries such as Australia. Lastly, around the pay, we have had many debates around the inspecting ranks and what we call the 1994 PRRB agreement. For those who aren't aware, the 1994 agreement was a lump sum payment that was given to the inspecting ranks. But in return for this payment, there was no right to claim overtime, except when you were called on annual leave days. But since 1994 times have changed, the policing environment is very different, and it's simply not right that after 31 years, this agreement has not been reviewed. So we're asking for a full review of the PRRB 1994 agreement on behalf of inspectors and chief inspectors. There is clear evidence from our survey that the inspecting ranks do want access to a shift pattern which is currently not allowed to them. There's also alarming evidence that the inspecting ranks are working additional overtime without payment, and there needs to be protections put in place to stop this from happening. So this is just a snapshot of the areas that we're looking at and the detail behind them. Obviously, we can't go over too much detail in the podcast, but the full evidence base will be available to you very shortly in the document that we've provided to the pay review body, and you will be able to find this on the Police Federation website. So many people may be wondering, if we're not part of the pay review body, why do we make a submission to them? Well, we need to be clear that we don't make a formal submission. But like I said, we do every year a pay positioning document, and we reference them to that pay positioning document. And within that document are the areas of concern that have been highlighted by you across England and Wales. So like I said at the start, this year we've been more open around what we're asking for. Now, whilst this may seem futile because we're an organisation and a group of workers who don't have access to industrial rights, we feel that it's very important that officers have their say and their view on the recommendations that are given to them around their pay and conditions of service. And if it isn't suitable, then we will make that very clear as an organisation to the government. What it does allow us to do is exert some political pressure on the government to actually evidence to them the feelings that you have within the policing around your pay and conditions. So as we finish this podcast, we have made our submissions to the pay review body, and we have met with them to go through those submissions in detail. We now wait for them to come back with their recommendations. Depending on what those recommendations are, we will need to decide the next steps that we take as an organisation and as police officers across England and Wales. It is only right that you get the proper remuneration and compensation for the dangers and risks that you face every day and the restrictions that are put on your private life.
Thanks very much for listening. To find out more, visit polfed.org or email podcast@polfed.org. This podcast is brought to you by the Police Federation of England and Wales. Have your say. Contact us via most social media platforms. Simply search for Police Federation of England and Wales. If there's an issue you'd like us to feature, then email us via podcast@polfed.org.